What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Erickson Lubin, 23 wins and 1 loss, taking on Jeison Rosario, 20 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. This is a pretty exciting matchup, and it's featured on an undercard for the Gervonta Davis versus Mario Barrios fight that's about to take place up at 140. Lubin versus Rosario is going to be the main undercard fight that night. This is a junior middleweight 154-pound bout, and you know, it's kind of interesting. Erickson Lubin is listed as the A side on this fight, even though only one of these two guys have been champion, and that's Jeison Rosario when he upset Julian J-Rock Williams for 2 of the belts. I think it was the WBA and the IBF belt. So Rosario won those 2 off of Williams, and then he lost him in his next fight against Jermell Charlo, who's about to fight to win all 4 titles. Charlo currently has 3. He's about to fight Brian Castano, who's holding the only other belt. Big deal at 154. So Erickson Lubin had an extensive amateur pedigree to the point where he was kind of on a lot of people's radar to potentially medal in the upcoming Olympics. But instead of going to the Olympics, Erickson Lubin turned pro, like right before he turned 18 years old. So, you know, he kicks off his pro career, racking up several wins, and then he starts featuring on some of the big PBC undercards. So this is around 2017, 2016. So 2016, he's only like 20, 21 years old. He had signed with Mike Tyson when he had turned pro, and, you know, they're both from Brooklyn, so Tyson had taken an early liking to Erickson Lubin. But by, 2015, 16, he started appearing on some of the big PBC undercards, cards featuring Keith Thurman versus Danny Garcia. That was one of them. And he looked like he had a very seasoned game, even at a super early age. He's always appeared very measured, like he doesn't get over his skis, where he's overcommitting with combinations to the point where he's just getting caught recklessly. Now, he has been caught once, big time, in his career thus far, and we're going to get to that. But you see him kind of building his reputation, breaking opponents down to the body, changing levels. And, you know, he's a southpaw, so he's sticking out the right hand, the right jab, high and low. So he's touching them to the belly and up high. He's looking to shoot a straight left hand, and he also has a nice whipping check right hook. It's a little bit underrated, actually, because it doesn't look as scintillating as like a Floyd Mayweather, Teofimo Lopez check hook. Lubin doesn't have like the fastest hands. He's not slow by any measure, but he doesn't have, you know, the Zab Judah like where Gary Russell, where it's just like blink of an eye, jaw dropping, you know, must see quickness. That's not Lubin's game. He's got a measured approach, and he's looking to get the opponent kind of backing into a rope or a corner, and then he'll rip them, you know, with a scooping left hand to the body or even a right hook to the body. So, you know, you've had other fighters who have the nickname, the body snatcher, but Erickson Lubin kind of, you know, fits that description. It's not his nickname. He's the hammer, but the body snatcher would be pretty fitting for a fighter like Lubin. So again, very seasoned game. Keeps his chin tucked, his shoulders high. He fights in a little bit of a crouch. You know, he's 5'9.5", so he's not very tall for the division, but, you know, with his shoulders up, chin down, and legs a little bit wider, he appears even shorter than that. So he's having success on these undercards, and then he gets a title shot for the WBC 154-pound title against Jermell Charlo, the slightly smaller of the 2 Charlo brothers. Jermell went up to 160 a few years ago, whereas Jermell Charlo has continuously just been doing his thing here at 154. So Lubin takes on Jermell Charlo. When they announced this fight, you know, I was very high on Erickson Lubin and have always been pretty high on both Charlo brothers, even though, you know, I would see Jermell Charlo struggle with John Jackson. Remember that fight? He was having difficulty losing a lot of rounds, and then he ended up knocking John Jackson Jr. out. Well, since then, Jermell Charlo, as he's been working with trainer Derek James, same trainer as Errol Spence Jr., has developed more of a devastating style, which has led to several more knockouts and just hey, you don't want to approach the pocket with me because you don't know where this power punch is coming from type of put you away power and strategy. So Lubin is challenging Charlo, and before the fight is even getting into a normal fight rhythm, Lubin ducks right into a devastating Jermell Charlo low right hand. Just caught him perfectly. So Lubin's dipping right into a low shot. You know, you see sometimes people are aiming for body shots, but then they, perfect example. Canelo Alvarez catching Billy Joe Saunders dipping away. Same type of deal, but instead of breaking an orbital bone, Jermell Charlo caught Erickson Lubin right on the chin. Erickson Lubin falls down on his head and shoulders. He was out. He tried to get up, but it was one of those where your bodily functions aren't working the way that they're supposed to. He had a stiff arm where he's kind of falling over on himself. Just one of those really bad type of knockouts. So he doesn't beat the count. Fight's over. One punch, first round knockout. Probably the most dramatic knockout of Jermell Charlo's career. I mean, he's had several knockouts, but this first round knockout over, again, super highly touted prospect, Erickson Lubin, where most people are thinking, yes, he's going to be a champion at some point. He is just too damn good not to, and too well-rounded not to. Well, his first huge step up for that title against Jermell, it did not go well. Devastating knockout, and since then, he's had 5 fights, winning them all, 3 via knockout, 2 via decision, the last 2 of which were against Nathaniel Gallimore, who is actually the first person to ever defeat Jeison Rosario. Nathaniel Gallimore, very good fighter, very tough contender. He was a latecomer to boxing. He turned amateur like in his early to mid-20s, turns pro, and he gave Julian J-Rock Williams, again, former champ, a very tough fight where it was like a majority decision for J-Rock. So super close on the scorecards type of fight. Well, Erickson Lubin beat Nathaniel Gallimore via unanimous decision, and then he fought Terrell Goucher, who, in my opinion, was kind of fighting a bit of a survivalist fight. He did have some solid rounds, but Erickson Lubin won that fight. It wasn't a very exciting or entertaining fight. It took place September of last year during the pandemic. This was like, one of the first PBC comeback fights during the pandemic. And yeah, it wasn't the greatest showcase for Lubin, but he did win the fight, and here he is coming in against Jeison Rosario, who is he's a very gifted puncher who loves it when the bullets are flying. Unlike Erickson Lubin, who again, aside from that dip into Jermell Charlo's power, Lubin, again, a very responsible defensive fighter. Jeison Rosario is more so there to get hit because he's looking for such a firefight. Rosario is looking to let his right hand go. Like, remember Nakathila just challenged Shakur Stevenson a couple weeks ago, and Nakathila was just so right hand heavy? Jeison Rosario is kind of close to that. He does do a little bit more with his left. He jabs more. He's got a nice, pretty wicked left hook as well. So he wants to let combinations go, but he's looking to really spark you with that right hand. And so he just whips it. It's what earned him the title when he upset Julian J-Rock Williams. Again, Rosario had his stumble about 4 years ago versus Nathaniel Gallimore. He gassed kind of in the middle to late rounds, got tested to the body. He got put down a couple times, and so they ended up waving off the fight. And that made a lot of people question Jeison Rosario's durability over the stretch of a 10 to 12 round fight. So then he has a couple comeback fights, like he has a 6-rounder, an 8-rounder, wins them both, then has a draw against Mark Hernandez, another 6-rounder. And then he beats Justin DeLoach, pretty decent fighter, wins the next couple fights, one via knockout against Juan Rodriguez in the 3rd round. That was impressive. Then he rematches Mark Hernandez, the same guy who gave him that 6-round draw a few fights ago, and he stops Mark Hernandez in the 9th round. So Rosario's power also carries a bit. If you're knocking people out in the late rounds, that says something about the consistency of your power over time. That's a big deal. Then Jeison Rosario has a split decision win over Jorge Cota. Then he challenges J-Rock Williams for those 2 belts, and he upsets Julian J-Rock Williams, who won those belts, versus Jarrett Hurd, who for a while was kind of seen as being the best or second best fighter in that division. He probably ascended to the top of the division after his big win over Erislandy Lara. That probably gave Jarrett Hurd the nod over Jermell Charlo, although they never fought to really settle that, which is unfortunate. But it was Julian J-Rock Williams who was spoiled the Jarrett Hurd party. And you can see Jarrett Hurd in his last fight, which was a loss on that Mayweather versus Paul undercard against Luis Arias. Jarrett Hurd's style doesn't appear to offer a lot of longevity. He's just getting hit way too much, way too cleanly. And, you know, even before his loss, before this Arias loss, before the Julian J-Rock Williams loss, he was showing signs of getting hit even in a lot of his wins. Hurd was, again, looking very tough. He's huge for the division, hits hard, keeps the pressure on, but is getting hit way too much. And Julian J-Rock Williams was able to counter so effectively and win that fight. Well, Jeison Rosario, in Julian J-Rock Williams' first title defense, stops J-Rock Williams in the 5th round. Then Rosario has a title unification fight against Jermell Charlo. This is for 3 of the 4 belts, because at this time, Jermell only has 1 of the belts, the WBC belt, and then he's challenging Rosario, who holds the IBF and the WBA belts. And this was a back and forth fight. You know, I was watching some of these rounds like, damn, is Jermell in trouble? Because, again, Jeison Rosario is such a formidable puncher. Like, he bangs with the best of them. Like, you don't want to get leveled by that right hand nor that left hook. And even his jab was looking pretty consistent to where he was backing Jermell up in some of these moments. Well, Jermell, you know, a very patient fighter. He's very sporadic with his output. And it's not that he's got a decrease, a super low volume output, but he's very deliberate. He'll take a step back, and then fire a nice counter. Or he'll work behind a jab and then just take angles and look for, you know, different times to let his hands go either to the body or up top. But he is eventually looking to spark you. You know, Jermell Charlo's 1 loss against Tony Harrison. He fought Tony Harrison a 2nd time and won that belt back via late stoppage. Jermell Charlo, always dangerous, and he eventually stops Jeison Rosario after hurting him up top with the wicked hook, buckling Jeison Rosario's legs, dropping him a couple times before the stoppage. So Rosario was already hurt. But the punch that finishes Rosario is really interesting because it was a left jab to the belly area, and it didn't even look like a particularly hard jab. But the way that Rosario went down looked like he needed medical attention, like he was having an asthma attack or something. He could not breathe, and he was writhing in pain. And it wasn't the type of pain that Oscar De La Hoya got dropped by Bernard Hopkins and was wiggling around type of pain where you can see that it's a you know, shot where it's like, I'm just agonizing and I can't even think about getting up because I'm agonizing so bad. Yes, Jeison Rosario was also agonizing, but his almost looked more, I don't know, cardiovascular. Like, it was more like, you know, either a heart, I mean, I don't want to speculate, but the way that he was just gasping for air. I mean, he obviously got the wind knocked out of him, but it was looking like, I don't know, did he break a rib? Like, something internal might have been going on besides just being totally winded. But yeah, very bizarre looking knockout. It was a hard jab that didn't look like a flashy pop type of jab. He touched him to the belly basically. But, you know, perhaps it was the timing of it. Sometimes they say that it's the punch that you don't see that is really going to hurt you. This goes for the UFC or boxing, but the same applies to the body. So yeah, check out that knockout victory for Jermell Charlo over Jeison Rosario. Well, this is Jeison Rosario's first fight back since that knockout loss, which, I mean, it's a really interesting matchup as a comeback fight. Like, you really want to fight one of the most well-rounded, well-schooled fighters in the division who just appears to be one of the best round winners. There's some people who will just get you out of there because they're blessed with that Deontay Wilder or prime Sergey Kovalev Triple G type of power. But then there are people who, and that's not to say that these other guys can't win rounds. I mean, Deontay Wilder obviously struggles to win rounds often. Triple G was winning his rounds. Kovalev was too for the most part. But you have other guys who are just very gifted round winners. They do enough to win the round because they adhere to the sweet science principles of boxing. But yeah, Erickson Lubin, tough matchup for Jeison Rosario. Look, I think Jeison Rosario has the power to do something to Lubin, similar to what Jermell Charlo did to Lubin. By the way, interesting that Jermell Charlo has finished both Lubin and Jeison Rosario. That guy is a bad boy. You know, he's in my top 10 pound for pound. Doesn't get enough credit in my book. But yeah, Erickson Lubin, I think he's going to, I think he's going to get hit with a few hard shots from Rosario. I feel like that is inevitable. I mean, even to the point where he might hold on for a second. He might get rocked, kind of wobbled, or something. I feel like Jeison Rosario is going to test his chin and catch him a couple times. That is, if Rosario isn't gun-shy after the experience versus Jermell Charlo. Again, unlike Erickson Lubin, who has had 5 fights since his knockout loss to Charlo, this is Jeison Rosario's first fight back in the ring. And because of that, and not only because of that, but that is a big reason I'm going Erickson Lubin here. I feel like he's a super crafty southpaw. He's going to be tough for Rosario to figure out. I think he is going to have a straight path with that left hand to Rosario's chin or body, because now after that Charlo loss to the body and the Nathaniel Gallimore loss prior to that, I really question Rosario's durability here. So I think that it could be, 4 rounds to 2, Lubin after 6, where Rosario does win a couple rounds and possibly even hurts Lubin. But I think once Lubin really starts cooking and Rosario's volume starts to decrease a little bit, maybe around the 7th or 8th round, Rosario's knockout loss versus Charlo, the knockout took place in the 8th, but I think he first badly got hurt in the 7th. I just think that there are going to be a lot of opportunities for, again, Rosario is going to let his hands go because he does want sparks to fly, but I think he's also going to be getting decked a significant amount from Lubin. And check this one out. Lubin's only 5'9.5", right? Whereas Jeison Rosario is 5'11". But Lubin's reach is 74.5 inches to Rosario's 70 inches. Jermell Charlo, 5'11" fighter, only has a 73-inch reach advantage. So the shorter Erickson Lubin has a 1.5 reach over the taller Jermell Charlo by 1.5 inches and a few inches reach advantage over Jeison Rosario. If Erickson Lubin didn't get knocked out in the first round, I was really looking forward to how that would play out, because I feel Lubin is even better of a round winner than Jermell Charlo. I've seen Jermell Charlo look like he has to play catch-up in some of his fights. That John Jackson fight that he ended up knocking him out. Or even the Tony Harrison rematch. Not the one where Tony Harrison was awarded the decision win in a very close fight, but the rematch where Charlo ended up knocking Harrison out. I thought that Charlo was falling behind on that scorecard in the Harrison rematch. So Erickson Lubin, to me, is one of the best fighters at 154, and I think he might even be the best round winner in that division. So I think he's going to be winning on the scorecards, but I do also think that as much as Rosario doesn't want to get stopped again, I think that because of Lubin's commitment to the body attack over the course of long fights, I think that Lubin is going to stop Jeison Rosario. I don't think Jeison Rosario is the same survivor that Terrell Goucher is. Also, Erickson Lubin is the only person to stop Ishe Smith. I mean, Ishe Smith, it ended up being his retirement fight. This was on the Gervonta Davis versus Hugo Ruiz undercard. Originally supposed to be Gervonta Davis versus Abner Mares, but Abner Mares had to pull out of the fight due to injury. I actually attended that fight in Carson, California. But yeah, Erickson Lubin knocked out Ishe Smith in the 3rd round. That was in February of 2019. And it still had 3 wins since that. So, even the COVID pandemic didn't really slow up his activity too much. He's been pretty busy since that loss to Jermell Charlo. He's rolling now. And I think he is on his way to eventually earning a title. Jeison Rosario is going to have to make some tough decisions here if he does end up getting stopped by Lubin, because that'll be 2 stoppage losses in a row. And I do think that this Lubin versus Rosario fight is going to be very exciting, especially in the early rounds, because again, Jeison Rosario will let his hands go unless there's been some other psychological damage from that last fight against Jermell Charlo. But I'm taking Erickson Lubin via pretty late round stoppage. We'll give it like the 9th or the 10th round. But please, let me know your thoughts on this fight. Who are you taking and how? And how do you see, well, first of all, who do you think is going to win between Jermell Charlo and Brian Castano, holding all 4 of the belts? If Jermell Charlo wins that, is he going to dump the titles and then go up to 160? Is he going to defend it against Erickson Lubin, who, this fight between Lubin and Rosario is to determine who the mandatory WBC contender is. So there are some title implications. But yeah, please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.